Good afternoon, everybody. Give a couple more moments to let those who are coming in come in. Welcome to you all on this August afternoon. It is not the it's not the greatest day here, it has to be said, but hopefully you are having a decent spell of it where you are. Okay, just a couple more moments whilst we then let everybody else come in. There's quite a few registered for today's session, and I'm really pleased that you're all here and very grateful to you for being here as well. Welcome along to today's safeguarding briefing. These are sessions I run every 6 weeks, 3 o'clock on a Tuesday. And they're an opportunity for us to go through some of the things that have been going on, bit of a refresh on where we currently are, and also a look ahead to what we can expect to see and some of the emerging themes that are coming at us when we're working in the world of child and young adult safeguarding and protection. Quick introduction for those of you who don't know me. My name is Kate Young, and I am an escaping solicitor, child protection solicitor, was doing that for so many years. And I still work with local authorities, but in a more education-based in terms of training and development, rather than as an actual lawyer. These days, and I'm the founder of the Safeguarding Association and also of the annual Global Safeguarding Summit, which is coming up in October. To get the best out of today, make sure that you are somewhere quiet. If you need to have headphones in, pop those in. If you need to scurry and make sure the dog's out of the room, the cat's out of the room, the husband, the wife, the partner, the whoever is out of your room, then do so. If you have any questions as we work our way through today's session, we'll be here for about 30 minutes, then feel free to use either the chat function or the Q&A function that you will find on the black bar on your screens. That's the best way to ask questions if you do have any. Here at the Safeguarding Association, we focus primarily on working with those who work with 15 to 25-year-olds. Why? Because they get the really difficult end of the stick. In terms of trying to navigate child protection and adult protection, they may not meet the criteria for either, but are still trying to work their way through and protect those who actually, as we had confirmed in our report at the back end of last year, are the second most vulnerable group in terms of 0 to 24-year-olds. Okay then. So what has been happening in the last few months? Now, these briefings, we don't go back across the history of the year. We're really just looking at a bit of a snapshot in terms of what has been going on over the last few months. And whilst there's been an awful lot of reporting, certainly when I put together the members magazine, there are always news stories, always horror stories that are floating about. In terms of massive changes, we haven't really had that many. We've had a couple that we will talk about, but nothing, we haven't had a huge range of significant updates. So hopefully enough for you to be able to manage as we move into through the summer with summer activities going on and then into the new academic year. This has featured on every briefing I have done for the last 18 months, but we are still in the midst of a global pandemic. Yes, the world is opening up. However, there are still variants on variants. There are still, whilst there are no restrictions, it's still a huge debate. In terms of what does that mean for those particularly who are within education or within sort of youth group areas. And I saw this morning yet more protests around students who would be, it's A-level day here in England. There are conversations happening about what the academic year looks like in September, a big drive to have students back on site, back on campus, back into halls, back into face-to-face teaching and learning. And I get that. I get why that's part of the student experience. I understand why students want that. The difficulty is that for universities, they're between a bit of a rock and a hard place. They have to keep everybody safe on site. Remember, the issues around COVID-19, its spread and its protections were made part of health and safety legislation. So therefore, there are enormous sanctions if they screw this up. Equally, what they don't want to do is have hundreds of students milling about together, and then there's a further spread of COVID and potentially further variants if they are accepting international students, particularly as the world opens up as well. And we know we're seeing in South Africa, basically across the Southern Hemisphere, an increase in COVID cases, while in the Northern Hemisphere, because it's our summer, we're seeing a decline quite naturally in what is happening. So I'm not here to debate the politics of this at all, but rather to share that it's a huge debate. For those of you working with older teens and young adults, this is a really tricky area to navigate. I know it's caused those of you working in FE and HE, particularly those in HE and those kind of youth areas, enormous sleepless nights trying to figure out what this is going to look like come the new academic year and how you are going to keep your students safe. I also know that an awful lot of the outreach work that would have been going on ordinarily over the summer hasn't happened because there hasn't really been enough time to plan it, and two, there were too many concerns about how they could keep young people safe and their staff safe and their families safe whilst having these activities and events live and in person. So that's something to watch if you're working with that age range. I think we're going to see more and more headlines over the next few weeks, and certainly into the start of the new academic year as to what that is going to mean. And then from a safeguarding perspective, how do you manage that? Because we know there have been enormous mental health issues arising out of this situation. Huge issues there always are when students go off to university or into FE. It's a huge jump from GCSE to A-level and A-level to degree. So you've already got those mental health awareness issues that need to be raised, as well as everybody still discovering who they are and all of those things that go on. So it's likely to be a relatively hot topic in those circles until we get partway through the academic year. Ooh, bit sensitive there. So what other new guidance have we got? Well, Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021 is now out. Comes into force on the 1st of September 2021. So a little over, where are we? 2 weeks away. It comes into force. There are massive updates that have been done. All of the updates are in Annex A of the document. I'm running a focus week at the end of this month, specifically looking at the updates to Keeping Children Safe in Education, because there are lots, and how that applies to those working with older teens and young adults. The reason for that is a change in legislation, which we'll look at in just a moment, but has brought in more organisations to the fold of Keeping Children Safe in Education. And even if you're not caught by Keeping Children Safe in Education, it's actually a really, really good place to start, together with working together to safeguard children, to make sure that you are doing what you need to do in order to protect the children and young people that you are working with. So whilst you may not be caught by it, it's really good practice, as far as I'm concerned, to make sure that you are updating yourself on wording changes, language changes, types of harm definition changes or additions that are going on, and where are we focusing. There is a particular focus around sexual abuse and harassment, At the moment, that is still ongoing. And that links into the Domestic Abuse Act. There is a massive consultation going on at the moment. The Domestic Abuse Act is now in place, but there's a consultation going on at the moment. So that consultation is up for victims of, so child victims of domestic abuse. We've talked about this, massive updates to keeping children safe in education. Come join us for the Focus Week at the end of August. I'll be running a number of sessions on different areas over that week. We start on the, she says, looking at her calendar, on the 23rd of August. It's entirely free to come and join us. So if you want to get involved, send me an email, or if you're part of our free Facebook group, keep an eye in there, and all the videos and all the training will be in and around there with all of the links for live sessions as well. And I'd love you to get involved if that's something you think would be of benefit to you. And again, looks like we're all open for September. We will see. We will wait and see what happens, but we do know that that will bring with it a number of safeguarding challenges that we will look at in a moment. Okay, other things to consider. You may have seen in the news over the last few weeks, there have been a number of reports come out from the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. There was a report a couple of weeks ago around abuse within Lambeth Council, within their foster care system. We've had reports out around sport. We've had reports out around a whole range of areas. One of the reports that has come out as well is around perpetrators and issues around errors that are made when we are looking at recruiting people, or that we are not sharing information. It's a time-served particular situation, this issue of not actually sharing information, although we do share it, it's just not necessarily in the most timely fashion. That's still there as well. There are likely to be more and more of these come through, even though the inquiry is starting to draw to a close. Definitely keep your eye on those. Some really great learnings coming out of those particular areas around what good practice looks like, what we can do, and some of the really scary statistics that have been coming out, which unfortunately those of us who've worked within child protection have known, but it says something quite strongly when you see it in black and white, and you've got those conversations happening and you're getting them almost direct from the victims as well. There's a focus, as I mentioned just now, from Ofsted on sexual violence and harassment. Now, they're looking at how it's being catalogued, they're looking at how it's being recorded, how it's being dealt with, how it's being recognised. This is a really tough area. It's not nothing within child protection is light and fluffy at all, but this really isn't light and fluffy. It affects all age ranges, so primary schools right the way through to FEs and beyond are being asked to collate this information. And it rolls into some of the PHSE work that's being done within schools. If you're not in an education establishment, this is still something you need to be considering. You need to be thinking about how you are protecting your young people from sexual violence and harassment from their peers whilst they are within your organisation, how you deal with that, what your processes are for making sure that the right support is in place. Within education, there's a whole section, part 5 of Keeping Children Safe in Education as is, talks about how that's done in terms of risk assessments, making sure there's a focus on supporting both alleged perpetrator and alleged victim, and making sure that both continue on with their education where possible. That's very difficult when you are in a non-education establishment, but yet still have a safeguarding responsibility for those young people. Something I've been working with Safeguarding Leaders Hub members on as well, about how they can make sure they are doing what they need to do and can evidence that they are protecting those who are alleging violence and harassment whilst they are working or attending sessions as part of the organisation's portfolio or curriculum. It's tricky, and it's about making sure that not only is the young person protected as much as possible, but also making sure that the organisation itself is protected and can, should the need ever arise, make sure that it can mitigate any issues around complaints or legal claims for allowing the abuse to occur or the harm to occur. So it's a bit of a minefield, but one that we do have to navigate when we're working with young people. Let's take a look now at some legal updates. What has changed in terms of the law in the last few weeks and months? Well, the big one is the Domestic Abuse Act 2021. There is a new standard definition of domestic abuse. It involves victims being recognised when they're 16 plus, and that children are seen as victims of domestic abuse in their own right. That latter part is out for consultation. And if you're working with children where they would be seen as victims of domestic abuse, I encourage you to get involved in that consultation to make sure you can make sure their voices are heard and that you can put forward your professional views on how that whole thing works. It has the potential to be an utter minefield. From a legal perspective, it's wonderful news. It's absolutely fabulous news that we've moved on to that stage. And I'm really grateful that it has, but there does need to be some more work to make sure that it's fit for purpose and that children aren't falling through loopholes, or we go the other way. And even though a parent may be doing all they can to protect the child from ongoing abuse, because the child is seen as victims, the local authorities automatically intervening and looking at issuing care proceedings at the other end of the spectrum. So lots of work still to be done there, but nevertheless, fabulous work thus far and a huge, enormous step in the right direction in relation to this. The Education and Welfare Act 2021 was campaigned for some time, and it brings under Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021 16 to 19 academy colleges. So those colleges who were part of a multi-academy trust or had academy status were actually outside of the remit of Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021. That's now being dealt with, and they are well and truly within the remit for that, as our specialist providers and independent learning providers as well. So that means if you're working for one of those organisations or you know children who are attending, they must be complying, with Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021. Now, I just want to pause a moment on this 16 to 19 bracket, because there's a couple of important things here that we really need to consider, particularly in light of Ofsted resuming their inspections and looking at degree apprenticeships as well. And we know that the legal age for somebody becoming an adult is 18, and up until aged 18, Keeping Children Safe in Education used to apply and stopped when you became an adult. So that's where all your child protection process in the run up to being 18, child protection, and then you move into adult protection should you meet specific criteria. What we're starting to see is a move towards Keeping Children Safe in Education having a broader remit, which would mean that even if you have somebody over the age of 18, your safeguarding policies need to cover them, and you need to make sure you're complying with everything within keeping children safe in education, even though the referral process either doesn't exist or would look very different to those who are under 18. So it's just a note here, as watch this space. I think I'm watching with interest to see how Ofsted manages its initial reviews, reports, monitoring visits for these 16 to 19 academies and its degree apprenticeships into universities, to see what they are looking for. At the moment, it looks like they're going to treat them like FE, but it's what else that looks like, because that will have a broader impact on those of you who work outside of education. Because at the moment, remember, working together safeguard children stops at 18. We're now in a situation where keeping children safe in education is going to be applied by post-18 education providers. So I'm watching with interest whether or not the age range starts to be expanded, and we start seeing more and more requirements under things like working together to safeguard children and keeping children safe in education, up to 20, 21, 23, that kind of or that traditional youth age range, which is broadly speaking 13 to 24, 25, that kind of age range. So watching with interest to see what happens, because that for me has enormous implications for those of you not just within education at the upper age ranges, but also for those of you working outside of the education arena, but who would be caught by working together to safeguard children, and potentially other issues around that as well. Just checking there's no questions. Okay then. What else have we got? Well, we're still waiting for the online harms bill to be enacted. That still isn't in place as yet. And I think I saw it's likely to hit Parliament in September. So watch this space. So what do we need to consider? Well, sadly, this slide hasn't really changed in 6 months, because we've been in almost a state of Groundhog Day somewhat. We're seeing increase in referrals, more so around a rise in mental health concerns, around a rise in domestic abuse situations. That's still ongoing. We know frontline workers are struggling. Lots of you have had no ability to take any proper breaks and have had working from home issues, as well as being right on the front line in offices and in people's homes. Information sharing seems to have got a lot better, actually, because everybody's in the same boat. I'm hearing really positive things about the way information is being shared, but I'm also hearing some really awful things about the way things like conferences and child in need meetings are being managed. One thing I think we do need to keep an eye on for certainly September, October onwards is this rise in unemployment. And with that will come a rise in poverty. It's just the way the two work together. Furlough is due to end in September. I don't know whether it will continue. I don't know at this stage what else is going to happen, other than the additional £20 that was going on to universal credit payments is due to stop as well. So again, there's a lot of conversation around a universal living wage, around standard fees for living. The reality of the situation as we stand is that I saw a report from the National Chamber of Commerce that suggested we were going to see up to about 30 to 40% rise in unemployment. That's enormous, and is what the Chamber says has been masked by the furlough scheme. Companies that otherwise wouldn't have been able to continue to paying their staff have been able to do so, but at a much reduced rate because of furlough. When that goes, they're not in a position to be able to continue paying their staff. And so unfortunately, we're looking at a significant rise, one in redundancies and two in businesses folding, which will have a knock-on effect on rates of poverty. It's just the way it works. If you don't have as much money coming into your home, then poverty rates do go up. It's the way, unfortunately, that it works. That may mean that we see more and more young people struggling. Hopefully those who would be able to get their Sunday, Saturday jobs will still be able to do so. However, the suggestion is that there is a 40% rise in students going to university, which means any of those lower end jobs will probably be taken up by them. So those jobs there are jobs there, but it's a difficult situation. Again, not a political commentary at all, more just a recognition that this is where we are. This is a reality of the system. And when furlough comes to an end, the talk is from best estimates, looking at a 30 to 40% rise in unemployment as a direct consequence of the furlough scheme ending, which will have all sorts of implications for you in a safeguarding role, because we know with a rise in poverty comes a rise in safeguarding issues, not immediately, and it starts off very low level usually, but we do know that particularly if both parents are unemployed, that does give rise to a significant increase in parental conflict, which can then give rise to issues around low-level domestic abuse and the impact on children there, as well as not being able to eat, not being able to afford property, increase in homelessness, all of those other things that go on as well. So a word of caution as to what we are facing towards the end of September. That's our briefing over and done with. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. Just want to share with you a couple of things that are coming up. One, the focus week is the end of August. 23rd of August is when we start, and we'll be looking at keeping children safe in education 2021 and what that means for you. And what you will need to do as part of compliance with keeping children safe in education and working together to safeguard children, which was updated the latter part of this year. Also, if you're looking for your refresher training, maybe you've got some new leads starting and looking at safeguarding lead training, then get in touch. I have a couple of courses running. The refresher training is on the 28th of September, and there are still a few places left for that. If you want to know what happens once a safeguarding referral has been made, and how you navigate all of those various processes and procedures when it's out of your hands, then the Beyond Referral 6-week program is for you. And if you'd like to have more information, send me an email, hello@safeguardingassociation.com. Let's have a conversation and I can send you more information, and you can see whether or not this 6-week program is for you to help upskill you and give you the confidence when you're dealing with some of the significantly less fun issues with safeguarding that are rarely to do with the children and more to do with the plethora of professionals that you end up having to work with. So I'm being asked a question: if you have to make a referral to DBS because of, say, gross misconduct, do you have a responsibility to give the next organisation that info? It should be on their DBS if it's there, and I would liaise very, very carefully with your HR department around references and things like that. So just make sure you liaise with HR on that particular issue. But it should be on their DBS. It should be on their DBS check, but that may well depend on a whole host of other circumstances. So liaising with the DBS service and HR around any references. And finally, if you want more support if you have spent most of last year with your head in the shed because it's just been so busy, so stressful, so very difficult, then the Safeguarding Association Leaders Hub may well be for you. So let me know if you want to have a conversation with me about whether or not it is for you, completely obligation free. Then again, send me an email to hello@safeguardingassociation.com and we can have a conversation. And if you want to find out more information about it, then just go to safeguardingassociation.com and you will find more information in there. And equally, if you want to book any of the training that I've just mentioned, then head over to safeguardingassociation.com/shop, and they're all in there for you. They are limited spaces on every one of the courses. So if you want to get in, now is the time to book as well. Thank you very much for your participation this afternoon. I wish you a happy and warm August, and I will be back in 6 weeks with our safeguarding briefing. Before then, if you're working with teenagers, older teens, and want more information around that, I'll be running a free webinar in 3 weeks' time, 31st of August, on the types of harm facing older teenagers. And don't forget, the focus week starts on the 23rd of August, 2021. And to get involved, again, just send me an email, hello@safeguardingassociation.com, and I will send you the links in order to get involved with that focus week. Have a lovely day, everybody, and I will see you in 6 weeks.